I just very briefly want to introduce 4 characters that you will be meeting during this reading, just so that you get an idea. The first person that you will be hearing about the most is a young student of Palestinian heritage, and her name is Sumaya, and she works in the office of the newly elected member of parliament, whose name is Lutfi Latif, who is Egyptian-born but a German member of parliament. And he has a security advisor, we will find out why he needs one, by the name of Samson, who is a German. And then there's also a German journalist, a young woman by the name of Merle. These 4 characters you will encounter in the 3 excerpts from my book that I will be reading from. And the first one, in fact, is designed to lay out the basic scene for you. So it's written out of the perspective of Sumaya. And I think I will opt to sit down now that I have a microphone, if you don't mind. It was 3 minutes past 9 on Monday morning when Sumaya realized she'd already made the first mistake of her first day at work before she'd even set foot in Lutfi Latif's parliamentary office. She should have read the Globus before she came to work. How had she managed not to think of it all weekend long? She ought to have read the Globus this morning at the very latest. It would have been enough if she'd listened to Deutschlandradio or watched Morgen Magazin or read a newspaper on the way from Kreuzberg to the government quarter, any newspaper really. Instead, she'd spent the half-hour journey watching in fascination how much the city altered over such a short distance. As the florist shops, kebab shops, and kiosks grew fewer, the purely functional buildings that caught her eye out of the bus window on the way to Berlin Mitte became more and more. At the same time, the city got grayer, higher, glassier, and as if to uphold some kind of secret cosmic balance, the composition of the passengers around her changed in parallel. There were fewer and fewer babies and toddlers from one stop to the next. The faces grew whiter, the makeup subtler, and the proportion of people in suits and business outfits rose from 0 to 75%. Jackets and briefcases. She had noticed them, but she hadn't read a single newspaper. And so everyone else knew all about it when she got to the office, everyone except Sumaya the newbie. It's not exactly the best possible start, said Lutfi Latif, thank goodness addressed at her colleague Kurt Munkelmann, as Sumaya noticed, while he was showing a technician where to hang up the framed map of the world. The office suite consisted of 3 surprisingly small rooms linked by open doors. Only the first room had a door to the corridor. The walls were lined with half-unpacked cardboard boxes. Yes, that rather sums it up, Munkelmann said soberly, fiddling with his laptop. Do you know why the Globus didn't call us for a comment beforehand? No idea, answered Munkelmann. Have there been any inquiries from the press? Munkelmann drew a note out of his inside pocket. Generalanzeiger, Tagespost, Weltbild. Fine, well, let's not let it drive us crazy. But of course it will make our start here rather chaotic. We will have to decide how to react to it, said the MP. Sumaya, would you mind looking at all the material and making a suggestion as to how to deal with it towards the press, he asked. Yes, sure, Sumaya answered, not even considering. She looked at her watch. It was now 9:13. She had just been given her first task on the new job. The only problem was she still had no idea what it was about. Luckily, she had noticed on her way to the office that copies of the most important newspapers were laid out on many of the low tables in the corridors, along with the magazines, Globus, Argus, and Spiegel. The report she was looking for was on one of the first pages of the magazine. "In the sight of extremists" was the headline. Sumaya read as fast as she could. Only 3 weeks after his election to Parliament, the Green Party Member of Parliament Lutfi Latif has received death threats from Islamist extremists. Threatening emails, letters, and postcards have been handed over to the police. Most of the messages are apparently anonymous. Radicals accuse Lutfi Latif of encouraging Muslims in Germany to take a more active role in democracy and society as part of his election campaign, among other things. One of the emails states, "It is no secret that you are paid by the kuffar to expedite the division and weakening of the ummah, and that is tantamount to a death sentence for you. The security authorities are taking the communications seriously. We consider it a threat," said a high-ranking security official. "We know there are Islamists in this country who would put something like that into practice if they had the opportunity." Lutfi Latif, an Egyptian-born German citizen, is regarded internationally as a pioneering contemporary interpreter of Islam who attempts to reconcile social commitment and personal faith. Various leaders of the Al-Qaeda terrorist network have previously branded the Berlin MP a danger to Islam. Sumaya suddenly remembered the strange ending to her job interview the previous week. "It's the man from the federal police again," Munkelmann had whispered to Lutfi Latif. That must have been about these threats too. And now they had been leaked. Back in the office, both Lutfi Latif and Kurt Munkelmann, is it still? Yeah. Back in the office, both Lutfi Latif and Kurt Munkelmann were talking on their mobile phones. Sumaya decided spontaneously that she wouldn't get into trouble if she simply sat down at the desk in the smallest room at the far end of the suite. She had hardly lowered herself onto the office chair when Kurt Munkelmann came in. "Here you are," he said, handing her a fat envelope. "Thanks," Sumaya answered. "See you later," said Munkelmann as he left again. It is all going so fast all of a sudden, thought Sumaya, opening the envelope. And as she read through the first email, she realized she was facing a trip to a very dark place. "You are the worst of the munafiqun, the hypocrites. You pretend to be a believer, but your goal is to humiliate Islam. You use the language of the enemies of God, and you seek out their company, and that makes you one of them. You crawl on your knees before them. Everyone knows you are a boil on the face of the earth, and I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will throw your guts on the ground. Your crime shall be punished." What was that? Was that a murder threat? Or did someone just want to see Lutfi Latif dead? Was there any difference? Sumaya read the email again, very slowly. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine the person who had written it. Nothing happened at first, but then a picture formed in her mind's eye. She saw a man of about 30 wearing a khaki-colored jalabiya. He had dark, flashing eyes and a deep black beard about as long as a fist. The man was stabbing angrily at a worn-out keyboard. "We consider it a threat." She turned to the second email. "There is no greater offense than joining sides with the Taghut, and if you know anything about your deen, then you know very well what sentence awaits you. You are a murtad, and they are like disease that spreads fitna, and someone will come. You will receive a visit. You can rely on that. It won't be long now." Once again, she tried to imagine the sender. Once again, the same picture came up as before, an angry man with a fuzzy beard. Sumaya shook her head automatically as if to get rid of the image. Where had it come from in the first place? Could it be that she of all people, had the same cliches in her mind as all the others, all the people she got so angry with? She knew better than that, or did she? What was so threatening about a beard, a robe? She had seen thousands of men like that, peaceful and friendly men, when she'd been to Damascus with her father, for example, or staying at her aunt's home in Ramallah. So why did it only take a couple of lines of hate-filled threats dotted with Arabic words to change those people into caricatures in her mind's eye, as if every one of them had a bloodthirsty twin who just needed coaxing out? Even in her head, Sumaya realized, there seemed to be a set formula for what an Islamist, an Islamic extremist, a jihadist, a mujahid, a holy warrior ought to look like. On the other hand, thought Sumaya, I didn't think up that image either, did I? Don't the bad guys look exactly like that? The ones who plant bombs in the documentaries, the defendants in the terrorist trials on the news, the terrorists and their recruitment videos from Waziristan on the newspaper websites. I read and I see pictures, thought Sumaya, and the pictures I see are the ones they showed me before I even started reading. She wasn't sure whether that was a deep insight or a totally banal statement, but she decided to take an analytical approach, not to look for mental images anymore, only for facts she could use to draw conclusions. By just after 11, Sumaya had worked her way through the pile of 64 threatening letters and mails. She still didn't know what to recommend to Lutfi Latif, though. She looked at the sparing notes she had jotted down. None of the senders threatened that they themselves or someone they claimed to know would kill Lutfi Latif in the near future. Aside from that, none of them claimed to be speaking on behalf of a certain group or even any known organization. That was the easy part. But what was the significance of the fact that not all the threats or death wishes or whatever they were came from Islamic extremists? The first dozen messages had basically consisted of variations on the first two emails, but then she'd come across a handwritten letter. Dear Mr. Brand New Member of Parliament, just because some multicultural fetishist in some stupid office issued you with a German passport doesn't mean you are one of us Germans. Not that I care much about democracy personally, and anyone in your party has to be gay or disabled or a nigger or all those three things together to be taken seriously anyway, but whatever the case, you shouldn't start feeling too safe. There are still a few upright thinking people in this humiliated land who won't put up with you not knowing your place. With German greetings, the national resistance. How did a letter obviously written by a Nazi fit in with the Globus report, which only mentioned Islamists? And a few minutes later, she'd come across another message that raised a similar question. Mr. Latif, Islam is a peaceful religion. Don't make yourself ridiculous. You consider unbelievers animals and advocate killing them all. You are in favor of beating women, not abiding to laws, and not making peace with unbelievers. Of course, you quoted from the Quran in your election campaign, but strangely enough, it was always other passages. Why don't you just stand by your religion, tell it like it really is? You'd have nothing to fear. The Quran still hasn't been banned. Unfortunately, Judeo-Christian Western civilization is still slumbering, sung to sleep by two-faced hypocrites like you. Yet we will not look on idly while you and your hordes corrode our civilization, introducing Sharia by deceit, producing girls in headscarves, and abusing our tolerance with your crybaby mentality. No signature. We will not look on idly. Militant Islamists, Nazis, and now Islam haters. At least Lutfi Latif has the right enemies, thought Sumaya.
Thank you very much. I thought that after the first extract, perhaps I could ask a couple of questions. And one of the first questions that comes to me is, do you yourself experience that Islamophobia is a problem in Germany as you experience it yourself?
It is a big problem, and it is becoming a bigger problem. And that was the reason why I started this book, or why I wrote this book about this topic. Now, Muslims have always been met in Germany with a degree of animosity, but prior to 9/11, that was expressed mostly in terms of ethnicity or blatant racism. And you would be attacked for being a Turk because there were people who hated Turks. Since 9/11, this has changed, and the attacks have been more and more based on the fact that somebody is a Muslim. So, yes, Islamophobia is on the rise, and we can see dramatically in the Netherlands where that can lead. Not all these movements are militant, of course. Not all these movements are terrorists. But I am very concerned about that, because there's one thing that makes it easy for these people to spread their ideology. You cannot really defend blatant racism based on ethnicity, but you can or at least these people think they can, defend racism based on calling people Muslims, because then they will talk about Islam as a religion with certain properties, and they will sell these properties as being not alignable with concepts of human rights, for example. So suddenly, you're not being attacked for looking a certain way. Suddenly, you're being attacked because you are not a defender of universal human rights. And that makes it easier to spread this message. And this is what is happening in Europe right now. So it has become more difficult for people to call this out for what it is, blatant racism, just in a different dress.
I noticed in the early part of your extract that you were describing the difference in the change when you move from the part of Berlin that Sumaya is living in, where you mentioned kebab kiosks, to the other part when you have people with white faces and suits. Is that a kind of racial ghettoism that exists, that people live in different parts of the city depending on their origin?
Well, you can't say that for Germany, I guess, to the degree you can say it for other countries like the US or the UK. And I wouldn't use the term ghetto in that regard, but Kreuzberg, the part of Berlin where Sumaya lives and where she starts her journey, is the most multiculturalist area in Germany, actually. And it is where a lot of people with a migrational background will feel comfortable living. But so it is an idyllic kind of place to live, but it's also a place that has problems, obviously. Some of these problems are very, very viral, and they need solving as well. So, you know, it's a refuge, but at the same time, it's a lie. It's an illusion. It's not as great and happy-clappy as it may look. But for Sumaya, it is a refuge, and she leaves this refuge, and she enters a new world, the world of politics, which is very cold and glassy. And this is, I think, what she experiences on this short trip on the bus.
Is there a significance in the fact that Sumaya is herself obviously also a Muslim, that she's employed in Lutfi Latif's office? Or?
Well, there's a passage in the book where she applies for the job, and she has a very long conversation with Lutfi, and he never really makes this an issue. He hires her because she thinks that she's fit for the job. For her, it has got something to do with the fact, because what she sees in Lutfi is for the first time a Muslim politician who is able to, for his intellectual capacities, able to play arguments in a way that will make German majorities population understand certain things that they never really were explained before. So she really believes in him, and she thinks that he is the one who can find the right words to convince people that Islam isn't bad, that migration isn't bad, that people with a migrational background can still be Germans. So she has very high stakes in him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In this extract, I noticed that you say that most of the letters are from people who seem to be hating Islam. But on the other hand, there are also a couple of letters from a Nazi and from somebody who sounds very much part of the right extremist group. And is there a kind of significance to that in the way the novel develops?
It is, yeah. I mean, well, what happens is we have it. I mean, we will hear about this more today. There's a terror attack that takes place, and then there's the question of who did it, and there's people who claim it, and then there's other people who do not claim it but may well have been involved. So what I'm trying to convey in this book is that extremism is not something special to religious groups, and the Islamophobic movements that we have in Europe, at least some of them on the fringe, are as radical, as militant, and as extremist as Al-Qaeda is. It's the same thing, it's just a mirror image. And this goes that far that they actually have the same enemy. Because this is what this book is about. Lutfi Latif is an idealized person, but he's at the same time, being who he is, an intellectual, devout Muslim who's able to talk to, in multiple languages to different kinds of people and still have a conversation, a meaningful conversation. He's automatically a hate figure for the right and for Muslim extremists, because this is exactly what both of them don't like. Somebody in the middle, a moderate in the middle who can talk to both sides. This can't be for both of them. It's a problem. So this is why he needs to go.
That's extremely interesting. I thought that we would have a longer question and answer session after you'd had a chance to hear all the extracts. But at this point, if anybody wants to ask something on what you've already heard, please do go ahead and let us know what you'd like to ask. Yes, please.
My question is, when you are addressing so many different issues in this book,
Yeah.
are you raising the question that where, countries of the north and Germany now, as we're talking about that, they claim and they project themselves as being secular, pluralistic societies. So how does this fit in with that? Is there a question when you challenge this as well?
Yeah, of course I challenge that. I challenge that a big deal. There are large parts of the book that are discussing the role of media and the role of government and the role of government institutions and how they react to this kind of challenge. I like to think that I'm asking a lot of questions in a very universal kind of way. So this novel is not so much about taking sides, it's about making points and making clearer what is already happening. When I started writing this book, I knew from my daily work as a journalist that Islamophobia was on the rise, but it wasn't visible to anybody who wouldn't look into it. But I knew, I could project that it was going to become a public problem at some point. So I figured that now is the time to make this an issue in my book. And I think, I was right in that regard. I mean, it is becoming more and more obvious every day that there is an Islamophobic problem in Western Europe. Coming back to your question about how do our states, as states, not only people as people, how do our states react to that? I believe that is a question that will still need some time answering because the political parties, for example, have not made up their minds about this yet. And what they are still struggling with is that those Islamophobic radicals that I'm talking about, you can't just denote them as right-wing radicals. They consider themselves ultra-liberals. So you can't frame them as Nazis. That doesn't solve the problem. They are in every party. They are in the Green Party, they are in the Social Democratic Party, they are even in the Liberal Party. So this is part of the problem. The political parties can't cope with this problem because it's not a right and left problem. It's a problem that is very much, it's a new problem. It's a new kind of undercurrent in our societies that we still have not found a way to deal with properly.
Anybody else?
So should I use that? Yeah. Okay, good.
So then may I ask you to read the second extract, please?
Sure. And I have to apologize. This is going to be a bit more gruesome. But it is a thriller novel after all. So we do need some action. And also there's a serious background to this. I've been covering terrorism for a long, long time, but I've never experienced a terror attack myself, thank God. I'm very grateful for that. But being invited to Karachi is very special for somebody who's been covering these issues and has, taken the risk of describing a terror attack that, even though he's never personally experienced one. So I will be reading a passage now that describes the actual terror attacks through the eyes mostly of the journalist Merle Schwalb, who's present as well. And it's, for me, this is, I don't like to take the easy way. So if you invite me to Karachi, I will read my most vulnerable passage. So, I hope that you like it as much as you can like a description of a terrorist attack. We will see. This can't be happening, thought Merle Schwalb, shaking her head. But I can see it. Even though I can't hear it, I can't hear anything anymore apart from this buzzing, and I don't know where that's coming from. I'll write it down. Write down what happens. That's what they've taught me. The last line in her notebook was, presenter dull, Lutfi Latif brilliant. Now, still shaking her head as if to banish a thought by force, she drew a firm line from the left to the right across the page. The time. You must never forget the time. She cast a glance at her watch and noted down 8:41. What do I see? Merle Schwalb closed her eyes for a moment, opened them again and began to write. Glasses without lenses on the floor. Pool of blood under the table. Where is that from? A waitress, blood on her apron, leg gashed open, blood flowing, shoes missing, foot bloody too. Why isn't she screaming? She must be in pain. Oh, it's because I can't hear. Look everywhere, not just downwards. Look up, look forward. You know where to look. A camera burst open. Looks like a scarecrow. Tables fallen over, plates smashed. Mugs with the logo of the TV station. A man twitching, holding hands in front of his face. Next to him a woman. Looks dead. Mid-30s, jeans, sneakers, eyes closed. Arm almost detached, elbow bone visible. On her back. Tattoo on left lower arm. Next to her a man, older, bald. Table on top of him, unconscious or dead. Look further forward. Look where Lutfi Latif was sitting. Perhaps none of this is real, shot through Merle Schwalb's head as she went on, writing and writing. That would explain why I can't hear anything. Maybe that's what it's like in a dream. You don't know you're dreaming. But then why the buzzing? Right. Presenter's desk, orange, burst in the wooden slats protruding like a skeleton. Presenter on the floor, lying on stomach, ponytail getting redder and redder. Ponytail dripping, small puddle. Or it's all an exercise. They've blocked my ears, so I'd look more closely. I'm wearing headphones. That's where the buzzing's coming from. I'm working with the investigative team now. They have to do that kind of thing. Of course, they don't tell you beforehand. It just starts. And then you have to take notes with buzzing in your ears. Thank goodness I've got my writing pad. More notes. Lutfi Latif, grey pinstripe suit, blue shirt, legs sprayed, strangely splayed. On his side, blood coming out of nose, ear, mouth. Blood in his mouth. Eyes closed, eyelids bruised, one pressed in. Parts of hair missing, perhaps more. Ear bleeding, lacerated. Shirt stained and torn. Left shoe missing. Lots of blood. Shoe half a meter away. To Merle's left, a lamp fell from the ceiling. It is so strange when you can't hear, as if it was much slower. Keep writing. People running away in all directions. 2 children crying, looking for someone. Running to and fro. Man pulls other man out from underneath table. Motionless, splinter in forehead above left eyebrow. No blood, eyes closed. Dead? Fat, hiking boots, shopping bag. A tourist? Do they have tourists in the audience? Keep going. Broken glass everywhere. Parts of a mixing desk on the floor. A control knob set to 7. A young woman, long dark hair, brown summer dress, takes 2 children by the hand, holds their eyes closed, takes them slowly to the exit. I've seen that woman before. Keep going. 8:45. 4 paramedics run into studio. Hand signals, hectic. Inspect the injured. Run from one to the next. One runs to the presenter, looks at her neck, touches, shakes his head, leaves her. Goes to Lutfi Latif, takes pulse, goes on. Don't forget the details. Never forget the details, no matter how small they are. A bracelet on the floor, small silver beads, torn, the beads scattered. One table apart from mine is still upright. Now I know where I saw the woman. She was sitting right at the front on the left. The young woman comes back without the children, walks to the front, to the broken desk, large green eyes. She's looking for something, looking on the floor where Lutfi and the presenter were lying. She talks to a paramedic who points outside. She nods, worried. Why did I notice her before? You know the answer. Why? You know. Yes, I know. Because she was at a table with Zamzon. My God, what's happened here? I don't want this. I want it to stop. I can't hear anything. I want to hear again. I don't want this. I want him to stop pulling at me. I don't want this. Merle Schwalb turned around with a jerk. Something or someone was trying to drag her off her chair. It was Zamzon. He was talking at her, but she still couldn't hear anything. Merle pointed at her ears and shook her head. Zamzon nodded. He signaled to follow him. Again, Merle shook her head and pointed to her pen and writing pad. Zamzon's expression changed. He drew back his arm and slapped her. Merle got to her feet and followed him. She can't hear, Zamzan shouted against the noise and the screams. Okay, Sumaya, we have to get out of here right now. But there are still injured people and hardly any paramedics. Sumaya, that might have been just the first bomb. We are going now. Okay. What about Lutfi Latif? They don't know. They've taken him to hospital. The paramedic wasn't sure whether he had a pulse or not. Okay, are you injured? I don't think so. Good, come on then. The first noise Merle-Schwalb heard apart from the buzzing sound was the dramatic flapping of the helicopters above them. Perhaps, she thought in a daze, because I've never heard so many helicopters over Berlin. She closed her eyes and concentrated on the sound. If she could hear that, she might be able to hear other things too. And indeed, as if a curtain was being drawn back slowly or her face was being pulled out of a box full of cotton wool, she began to register other sounds, although only in muffled form. What had happened? She had witnessed the bombing. She had got up early that morning to watch Lutfi Latif to get some color for the story, for this story, as her boss Arno Erlinger had told her to do. Latif was making an appearance on the 2TV morning show, and she'd booked a place for the part of the program that was broadcast live from the small studio from 8:30. She had wanted to observe how Lutfi Latif behaved in the face of the alleged threat to his life, and he was on the show to talk about an initiative he'd launched for literacy skills for migrant women. She had never experienced him live before, and she'd been impressed by his panther-like smoothness, by his Obama smile. And then it had happened. She remembered a flash and the loudest sound she'd ever heard, and then I started writing. Instinctively, Merle's left hand reached for her inside pocket. Yes, the pad was still there. I wrote it all down. I took notes. I did not help, like this woman next to me, who was sitting with Samson, and whose name I don't even know. Merle felt tears pricking her eyes, but when she realized she was just about to cry over herself, she held them back. At a press conference in Berlin, the Federal Minister of the Interior appealed for calm and assured the public that investigators are working around the clock to shed light on Friday morning's bombing, which has so far claimed 7 victims and injured 30. Unknown terrorists had set off an explosive device in a television studio in Berlin-Mitte at around 8:30. No one has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. The Chancellor has cancelled a trip to Washington scheduled for this afternoon. The bomb exploded during a live broadcast while the MP Lutfi Latif was in the studio. According to a magazine report, the Green Party politician has received a number of death threats from Islamist extremists over the past weeks. The Interior Minister stated that it was too early to speculate about a link. Lutfi Latif was taken to hospital with severe injuries. Merle was relieved that her hearing had returned almost to normal, and she could think more or less clearly again. She was now sitting on the floor alongside the young woman with the long dark hair and the green eyes, in front of a small TV set in Samson's converted attic. This was the 3rd time she'd seen the footage of the explosion. She even saw herself, filmed from above. She hadn't even noticed the CCTV camera mounted up there. Then there was a cut, a concerned minister in a black suit behind a microphone. Then another cut, an archive photo of Lutfi Latif. And then another cut, a cutting from her own Globus article. Meanwhile, a ticker tape of the latest headlines ran along the bottom of the screen. Number of victims raised to 9. Chancellor, a cowardly attack. Federal President intends to visit site. Terrorism expert, we were warned. US President sends condolences. All following programs postponed. Samson was sitting a few yards away from her and the other woman at his desk. The moment he'd unlocked the door and shooed them up to the attic, he'd booted up all his computers and was now working on 3 keyboards simultaneously. Merle looked over at him. She knew that expression on his face. Total concentration, hardly blinking, a deep frown. She knew he was unaware of anything happening around him. He wouldn't say anything until he thought he had something to say. Why on earth didn't I think to help? Or at least run away? All I did was sit there and write. Is that some kind of déformation professionnelle? And if so, isn't it even sicker that I'm sitting here now, having just survived a bomb, disgusted with myself, and still all I can think about is whether my BlackBerry is still working so I can send my notes to the news desk? I was there after all, an eyewitness. There's nothing better than that. Oh yes, there was something better. Eyewitnesses can die, like the presenter, for instance, or the man with the splinter in his forehead. I wanted to tell you, it was great how you helped the children earlier. My name is Merle. I work for the Globus, she said to the woman with the dark hair. A brief moment of confusion in her big green eyes. You are Merle Schwalb? Yes. I am Sumaya Ashami. And how do you know Zamzon? He advises Lutfi Latif. I work in Lutfi Latif's office. I have known Zamzon for years. We used to be together. I have to go out now and make a call for a minute to let them know I'm still alive and all that. Sure. At that moment, Zamzon turned around in his desk chair. Merle, you can tell your boss there's an Al-Qaeda video claiming responsibility on the net. That'll impress him, just like your notes, I'm sure. Zamzon held out a memory stick, saying nothing. Thanks a lot, Zamzon, really, no problem. Is it the real thing? I don't know yet. What does that mean? That I don't know yet. Zamzon, are you more doubtful than about all the other Al-Qaeda videos you write about every other damn night? Don't shout at me, Zamzon replied quietly. But the answer is yes, for the time being anyway. And why? I don't know, for God's sake. It's just a feeling, okay?
Thank you. Well, that was certainly a very exciting passage. There are 2 or 3 different thoughts that come into my head. I notice on the manuscript that there is a distinction between the lines in italics when Merle is thinking to herself and the parts where she's making the notes. And I remembered you telling me that this has also been converted into a play.
Yeah.
And acted at the Berlin Maxim Gorky Theater. So I wonder, how do they deal with that kind of transfer? Because even listening to it, I think it's difficult for the audience to know what is she thinking inside her head and what is she writing down in her notes.
That's a very good question, actually, on 2 accounts. I mean, one is that I believe it is a passage that works best when read. But I do believe it also works when listened to, maybe in a slightly different way. As for the play that the book was turned into, they chose to start with the explosion. So what would happen is if you sit in the audience and wait for the play to start, it would actually start with a big bang, and then with a fake newscast. So there would be smoke on the stage and in the audience as well. So you would immediately feel part of the attack yourself, and much of what Merle has to say becomes your own immediate experience while sitting there as in the audience.
You worked with the play and the collaboration?
Yeah, I didn't write the play, but I was part of the effort. Yeah.
And were you satisfied the way that it came across on stage?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't perfect, I think, but it was good. And one reason I'm particularly happy that it was turned into a play, and at that fabulous theater, is that it is the first major production of a play in Berlin that touches the issue of Islamophobia. So this is what the book is about, and now people were able to see it on stage as well and be confronted with it. So that's why I'm very happy that they had that production. No matter if there were, slight problems with, on the dramaturgical level, but that was not a major problem. It was a good production.
Okay. The other thing that occurred to me was knowing that you worked with the investigative team yourself, and Merle Schwalb is working in the same kind of unit. Is this actually the kind of training where you're taught to stop feeling and just take the notes? And
No, it's not. It doesn't happen. But there's the newsroom that Merle works at at the Globus, which is a fictitious magazine. There's no such thing as the Globus magazine in Germany. But in that newsroom, things are brutal. It's a brutal newsroom, and it's a very good and very tough magazine. They're asking the right questions, but they are not very ethical in the way that they deal with problems. They will not allow doubt. They will always demand a degree of 100% of certainty. And my experience as somebody who covered terrorism and security affairs is that there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a 100% certainty. So any journalist who sells you a certainty of 100% is lying to you. And this is what these journalists are doing. Now, Merle is young, and she is not used to that. She knows it's wrong, but she also wants to be part of it. And that particular unit that she's attached to now in this book, it's really, I mean, a lot of journalists in Germany who read that book like those passages a lot because they said there's a lot of truth about it, but they also suffered from it because they said it's brutal, because this sometimes is how we work. And so I felt, when I wrote the book, I felt it was unfair to criticize other people and not discussing the role of the media, because the media have a huge role in terrorism. I mean, terrorism without media wouldn't work. Terrorists rely on reporters, and it's a very tough role you assume as a reporter if you decide to write about terrorism. You have to make tough choices, at least if you have half a conscience. So I wanted to discuss that as well. So Merle really isn't a bad reporter. She's just young and inexperienced. But the three guys in her unit that she works with, they are pretty bad.
It's interesting you say that, because at the last section, when Zamzam hands her back her recording, it almost sounds as if he is critical of her for taking...
Yeah, I mean, Zamzam this is also something that I couldn't convey that in such a reading, but of course, I mean, he was the boyfriend of Merle in the past, but he likes Sumaya now, and he was there, all three of them were there, and he saw how Sumaya helped and how Merle just took notes. So in that particular situation, he knows what her demands are, and he's willing to help her with that video that he found on the internet, but also he will not let it pass. He will make a comment that he thought that Sumaya did the more sensible thing by helping people rather than sit down and lean back and take notes.
I think you underestimate the amount you actually managed to convey, because you do mention Merle thinking, who is that girl, and she had seen her before.
Yeah.
And then you also mention Merle thinking that, why didn't I help?
Yeah.
And so ultimately when Zamzam hands her this...
So it's understood.
I feel that there was a kind of tension that was communicated, and I wondered if you were trying to bring in a criticism of Merle and the way that she was taking these notes.
Well, you're a very, very attentive listener.
I have to be. Part of my undertaking. And then I wondered, of course, you pronounce the name Zamzam, but it reads as Samson.
Yeah. Well,
and is there a meaning in the name?
There is. I mean, it's really a nickname. His real name is Samuel Sonntag. And Samson is his nickname given to him by a childhood friend, which is the first syllable of his first name and the first syllable of his second name. So it just, becomes Samson. And this is why he carries that name. It's not his real name.
Okay. Thank you. I was thinking of Samson and Delilah. And
no, there's no illusion there.
No illusion. Again, if we have any questions from the floor, please take the opportunity.
Time.
So shall we just go straight into the next one, headlong?
It's a short passage, and it's my favorite passage, so I would not finish without reading it. And this last passage is about Sumaya again, and it's about something that I also feel has got a lot to do with Karachi, or with Pakistan in more general terms, because it's a reflection of what it is like to be a second-generation migrant. And I'm sure that most of you in your families, or probably in your personal experience, have been in touch with this issue at some point. So this is a scene between Sumaya and her flatmate. Ulf is a Nazi. Mina. All right, Ulf's not a Nazi, but I swear he would have been one 70 years ago. Is it that bad? Yes. Sumaya could see her flatmate was close to tears. Seething with rage, Mina slammed the front door behind her and threw her handbag in the corner. Susu, you're not going anywhere tonight, are you? She asked. No, I'm here. Thank you, Susu. They went out on the tiny balcony overlooking the courtyard behind their flat. Back in spring, Sumaya had set up a small forest of young olive trees along the railings, and now they had grown thicker. That had made the balcony more welcoming, but at the same time more crowded. They had had real trouble finding a table and 2 chairs small enough to put out there. Sumaya squeezed on one of the chairs. Mina was so petite that she managed to fit her feet onto the seat as well as her behind. She fished a packet of cigarettes out of her back pocket and lit one up. Mina did not smoke often, so Sumaya still found it strange when she breathed out her smoke. I hate him, said Mina, staring at a spot at the other end of the courtyard. What on earth happened, honey? Come on, tell me. She and Ulf had gone out to the lake in Grünau, Mina said. They had swum together, eaten French fries from the snack bar, and cuddled up on their rush beach mats. It had all been wonderful. So wonderful that she had started thinking about the future, about a life shared with Ulf. I told him I'd like to go to India with him for a year or so. We've both nearly finished our degrees. Perhaps we could work for a great NGO or something, I suggested. Literacy skills or leprosy or orphans or whatever. I could really imagine it out there by the water. And how did he react? He said he didn't want to go to India. Why not? He said he doesn't have any connection with India, what an asshole, and he was more interested in other countries if he was going to go abroad in the first place. No connection with India? Exactly, Mina snorted with anger. Me, no connection. Mina, the big nothing in his life. I mean, I expose myself emotionally in front of him, tell him my dreams for the two of us, and all he says is, he has nothing to do with my life. And then, I told him that hurt me. I'm an Indian after all, and it'd be only fair for us to go see India together. And what did he say to that? He said, you are not Indian, you are half Indian, but actually you are German. And anyway, you don't even know your way around in India. That's unbelievable. Mina couldn't hold back her tears anymore. I mean, sure, I've only ever been to India for 2 months in my entire shitty life. I don't speak a word of Hindi, it's true. But so what? What does he know? He just doesn't understand. Maybe you caught him off guard, Sumaya offered as an explanation. Susu, don't stand up for him, please. You know exactly what I mean. Those German potato heads don't have any right to judge who or what we are. We are the only ones allowed to do that, if we even can. Sumaya took Mina's hand, not contradicting her. She knew exactly what had upset her so much. It was the curse. The curse that meant that the thing that was innermost to yourself was just the outer trappings for the others. The curse that meant you could not explain it. That meant you didn't want to belong if the others insisted on it, and at the same time insisted on belonging if the others thought it impossible. The curse that was both a prison and a refuge for everyone familiar with it, 1,000 possibilities and none. The curse that meant you did not know who you were and you never would. Half and half. That's what she'd always answer as a child when someone asked her how she felt, Palestinian or German. She'd say it in a deliberately snotty tone, hoping she wouldn't have to put up with any more questions. As she got older, her answer changed. Perhaps it was to do with her first trips to Ramallah without her father. Whatever the case, later she'd sling a defiant both at her questioners in exactly the same tone. Meanwhile, though, she had realized that truth was somewhere between the two, and that both answers were basically the same non-answer, that she was neither one nor the other, but still both, that one divided by two didn't always produce two equal halves, that identity had nothing to do with mathematics, but was changeable, and above all fragile, vulnerable, never final, never safe, always under threat, a curse and a blessing, two homelands and at the same time none, a hiding place and at the same time a prison cell. She was so full of memories that she didn't even know how reliable they were, and full of homesickness for something she didn't even know. And there was a longing, a burning longing, but at the same time the fear of facing up to it. Sumaya thought of the summers of her childhood, all of them spent in Ramallah. A picnic with aunts and uncles and half a dozen cousins, somewhere beneath pine trees on a hill outside of town. Blue plastic canisters of ice-cooled water, a smoking barbecue loaded with kebab, pine cones, dried branches and tiny stones under the children's bare feet, children's laughter, maternal hugs from her auntie, so very welcome, the scent of her uncle's cigarette smoke, their hands laid on her head in passing, susu ya susu, the warmth of the sun on her hair, the warmth of the sun on her eyelids when she took a moment's pause. And her father, happier than he ever was otherwise, sitting on a folding chair with a glass of arak in his hand, ice cubes clinking when he raised it to drink. Although she was only 5 or 6 years old, she could tell just what a relief it was for him to be there, not having to take care of her on his own for a few weeks, being able to offer her a family. She saw herself sitting on the branch of an olive tree as the sun went down and her aunts packed up the bulging bags again, the babies already asleep, the charcoal on the barbecue smoldering low. She had promised herself, she remembered it well, not to forget that moment, with all the determination of a little girl, and she never had forgotten it. Had she ever felt happier? Baba, she thought, you were so generous. You gave me 2 lives, but I can only live one of them, and that's eating me up from inside. Every time she saw her father, even now, when she visited him, or he came to see her, all she had to do was look into his eyes, resting proudly and happily on her, and yet at the same time seeing a different Sumaya who didn't exist, but could exist, or might have existed. And she knew he felt the same thing in the same way as she did, that everything could have turned out differently, that the life they led here in Germany was not the one determined for them, but a life of happenstance. And she knew that he too imagined a different life for himself when he was alone, like a dirty little secret that couldn't be any purer and yet was impossible to ever share or tell. Countless hours in which they both imagined the life they might have lived, the unlived life. And in that life, her father was an emergency doctor in Ramallah, not a vascular surgeon in Oldenburg, and he treated the injured boys pulled out of the rows of stone throwers because they had been shot. And he wasn't the faraway uncle, the faraway great-uncle, the faraway cousin who received phone calls at night, always trying to keep them a secret from Sumaya. They've arrested Qasim. We haven't heard any news of Abdullah for 3 days. Hashim has been shot at. No, in his unlived life, he would be kneeling in the dust of Ramallah's streets, and he wouldn't be helpless. He would do whatever he could to save them all. She knew he thought these things without ever having talked about them with him. She knew it as surely as anyone can know anything. She knew these were the pictures that haunted him at night, that he felt guilty because he could do nothing more, did nothing more than whisper words into the telephone, words that couldn't bridge the distance, and send money for a lawyer who wouldn't achieve a thing. And Sumaya herself, what would have become of her in that other life? She had no answer to that question, but she'd have liked to find out, except that she never would. And that was what was so painful, the fact that it felt as if she'd never get to know herself fully. Thank you.
I just want to check with Sami, because I know it's 6 o'clock now, so that's the end of this hour. But I had mentioned that since you had given us this room, we could perhaps stay on and ask questions if we...
Yes, actually we scheduled, so I have 2 more readings.
Oh, you've changed the schedule. So in that case, regretfully, we have no more time, and thank you all for being such an attentive audience, and thank you too for being here. Yasin told me that he's brought a couple of copies of the book in German. It's not available in English yet, but if anybody is interested in getting it from him and having it signed, he's willing to share the copies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.